Tupac had this thing about him. It's like you wonder, well, I wonder how his life would have been if he took a different route, if he didn't go into rap, or maybe if he didn't go into gangster rap. And I know people are going to be like, oh my God, he wasn't a gangster rapper. Okay, that can be debated. But anywho, he had this thing about him where it's like he knew, it seemed like he wasn't afraid to express how he felt about a woman and the women that he respected. And I think that is what caused a lot, I'm going to speak for myself, caused me to like him. And even hearing some of his tracks today, years later, as an artist, I have respect for him. I just listened to a track he did called Can You Get Away? On his Me Against the World, where he was trying to talk to a woman who was in an abusive relationship. And just listening to his lyric brought those lyrics to life, where you could feel him trying to get to know this woman, trying to pull her away from the dangerous situation she was possibly in. So, it just really made me like him more. But check out this. I'm going to read this insert that is a part of the article I'm doing this video on. Check it out. He had quieter times. This is what Shock G said about Tupac. Tupac snuck off with Shock G and a couple of girls. They went to the back of the tour bus where it was dark. Shock was snuggled up with his date, and he heard Tupac whispering a few rows up in front of him. Shock G was thinking that he was, getting down, doing whatever with this young lady. He said he was listening. He was straining to listen to what Pac was saying. And he hears Pac explaining terms of endearment to the woman. He was speaking real low. And so Tupac didn't want Shock G to hear him. He said he almost laughed. And he was wondering, what does Pac know about terms of endearment? I'll be back. Hey, welcome back, folks. Newcomers, welcome. You're always welcome. Just be mindful and respectful. That's all I ask. Anywho, I was talking to somebody a few months ago, and I asked them, because I have a lot of content or research on information about Tupac, from articles, blogs, what have you. And so I was talking to this individual, and I was gauging the temperature, like, how many people still like or enjoy hearing about Pac, things they heard about already, or maybe things that might be new to them, and this person was telling me people enjoy hearing about Pac. I know I enjoy hearing about him, especially when it's things I never heard of before or maybe need to remember. But I actually stumbled across this channel called Tupac Facts. And they have a lot of clips and videos about him. You guys should check it out. And one of the videos I'm playing right now, I got a little clip of one of his videos he has where Pac is playing with his, playing around, having fun with his family in Stone Mountain. So this article or this video I'm doing is like a precursor to a video that I'm working on. And it's about Tupac. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it's about, but I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoy it. And without further ado, let's jump into this article. They're interviewing Pac's mother. And I believe it's like a year or so after he was unalived in Vegas. I thought it was interesting, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So check it out. Hold up. Wait a minute. I forgot about this. I found a story about Tupac. I don't know if it's true or not, But I thought it was quite interesting and I wanted to share it with you. So I'm going to read this story before I get into the article that was printed or published about Tupac in 97. And the reason why I'm going to keep mentioning the article that was published in Vanity Fair in 97 is because people get in these comments and want to act like or come at me like I wrote the article. So I'm going to read this story right quick. Then I'm going to get into the Vanity Fair article about Tupac that was published in 1997. Okay, the story that I'm going to read right now is called Tupac Wild Side. The night Tupac went crazy. And if you went to a Tupac concert in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1994, then you might know if this story is true or not. Check it out. On September 3rd, 1994, at a Mecca Arena in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a concert took place that included Boss, Big Mike, Xscape, Spice One, and more, including the headline act Tupac Shakur. After all the acts had done their thing, which included an appearance of McEiht and Spice One, which really got the crowd pumped, it was time for Tupac, and the crowd was ready, or were they? To the roar of Tupac and Thug Life, he hit the stage with vengeance, opening with a track called Bury Me a G from the new Thug Life album. But he seemed like a man out of control. Midway through the song, his mic started fading in and out, and while Thug Life were doing their verses, Tupac was running around trying to get his mic to work. Finally, he got a working mic and all hell broke loose in Milwaukee. Halfway through the second song, Tupac stopped the show for a moment of silence for the 14-year-old girl who was unalive in Chicago by an 11-year-old boy who was later killed himself. But before the silence began, Tupac yelled out, "You better stop killing these babies or else I'll unalive you myself." I sat with my camera in hand wondering, where did this come from? But I didn't have time to think about it for long. Tupac was now yelling, "I taught you all about harming those babies. Keep it up and I'll unalive all you MFers." With that, I started looking around the arena to see if anyone else was as shocked as I was. Then I started thinking that it must be a skit or some part of an act. But then I looked in his eyes. I was very close to the stage and I realized that this wasn't a skit. Tupac was dead serious. Before he could get to the next song, the audience started throwing coins at Tupac and he wasn't going to take that. No way. I don't know who the F you all think I am. You mother effers better stop throwing ish at me. He then offered a $200 reward for anyone to bring an offender to him on stage and said he would get you paid, but he will die tonight. Again, I was shocked. Where was all this coming from? Did a coin tossing incident cause the violent reaction? But what came next was even worse. People in the audience started throwing up gang signs at Tupac. That did it. You can flash them gang signs if you want, screamed Tupac, but I'll unalive all you MFers. This is Thug Life. Then he invited people to come on the stage and try to kick his ass. Thug Life rushed on stage to be with Tupac, and I started thinking that this was like a scene from a West Side Story, and then I thought it couldn't get any worse. It did. A shouting match occurred with a guy in a pit. Great, just where I was. A member of Thug Life just kept at it. Suddenly, the guy threw a cassette on stage, and then a water bottle was hurled at him. I started thinking what this looked like as an arena, and the Mecca security tried to guide the people out so they wouldn't get trampled. I was glad to be out of there safely, but I felt I had to find out what happened. Later, I interviewed the chief of security, Sergeant Delroy Roberts, who told me that the police had to kick in Tupac's dressing room door. They made everyone kneel with their hands behind their heads as they searched the dressing room. They found 2 semi-automatic weapons. No one admitted to knowing about the pow-pows. As I was leaving, people who had been in the audience were saying, "What was wrong with him? Has he snapped?" We all could have been unalived, and we could have. I was shocked and saddened. Why did this happen? I had just witnessed another chapter in a troubled life of Tupac Shakur. That was the end of the story I wrote when I reported this incident. Now we know the answer to my final question. It ended badly and sadly. Personally, I like Tupac. Having met him once in Chicago, I found him to be very pleasant and cooperative as I took photos and interviewed him. I sincerely liked the guy, so I wanted to hear this side of the story on what took place in Milwaukee, but a call to his manager's office informed me that the office was no longer representing Mr. Shakur, and that was the last time I had contact with the late Tupac Shakur. That was the end of the story that I found, in addition to the story or article I'm about to read. So do with it what you will. And let's get on with this article from Vanity Fair titled "To Die Like a Gangster, Tupac Shakur," and it was told while they interviewed his mom, Afeni. Gangsta-rap star Tupac Shakur was unalived in a drive-by shooting last year. He had so much to live for, and his fans helped to make his 4 albums, platinum. The song Tupac Shakur friends tell you to listen to, the one they say you have to hear to know him as he was, is the rap he wrote for Afeni, who carried him unborn in a jail cell and kissed him goodbye 25 years later in a trauma ward. Dear Mama, it was called. And she's what it's all about. A single mother on welfare who came home after working late and tried to fix her kids a hot plate. A woman who, even as a crack fiend, always was a black queen. A heroine who always was committed. Tell me he cries how you did it. Even though I act crazy, he calls out to her at the finish, I gotta thank the Lord that you made me. But the plan is to show that I understand. You are appreciated. There's no one above you. Afeni Shakur listens to that song often these days, at home, in the house her son bought her in Stone Mountain, Georgia. It is a fine place, far finer than the prison cage she knew a quarter century ago during what used to be called the movement. She was a Black Panther then, accused by the police or accused by the people of the state of New York of plotting to blow up department stores and police stations. It was a fantastical charge, and Leonard Bernstein, Odo Preminger, Donald Sutherland, and Jane Fonda proclaimed her innocent. But the prosecutors had one thing right. Afeni Shakur was a person to contend with. How else to describe a woman who fought her jailers for the daily milk and eggs she needed for the child inside her? You can hear the grit in her still when she talks of her boy. Let me tell you the reality, she begins, her words as sharp as his lyrics. My great-grandmother was a slave. My grandmother was a sharecropper. My mother was a domestic, and I was whatever the F I was. That child changed things for all of us. There are moments, though, remembering the man that child became, when Afeni grasped her shoulders and, like any grieving mother, shakes with pain. Listening to Dear Mama is one of these moments, remembering the ringing phone that broke her sleep the night of September the 7th. Another. Her friend Yasmin was on the phone. Tupac's been shot, she said. Las Vegas. They say it's bad. Afeni didn't need details. She'd always known this call was coming. From the moment he was born, she says. I measured his life in 5-year periods. When he was 5, I was so grateful. When he was 10, I thank God. He was 10, 15, 20, 25. I was always amazed he survived. He was a gift. He was snatched away just as his music predicted, gangsta style, in a hail of heavy caliber metal fired fittingly from a late model Cadillac. Moments before, he had filmed his own death in a video. It's just a fun little game. The game of life, Tupac said while working on the piece, which showed him expiring bullet-riddled in an ambulance. I know one day they're going to shut the game down, but I got to go around the board as many times as I can before it's my turn to leave. Go around Tupac Shakur did, taking turns without asking, breaking hearts and rules, and when he left the board, gunned down by still unknown assailants for still unknown reasons, the chips were piled high. Tens of millions in record sales, 6 movies, hundreds of poems and lyrics, plans upon plans upon plans, including funding a chain of daycare centers to ease the burdens of mothers like Afeni. There was a darker legacy, too, during drug dealing, arrest for assault and weapons possession, a prison term after an alleged gang R. He was a world of opposites. Warm and sensitive one instant, cold and quick-tempered the next, and the explosiveness of the mix made him rap's most dangerous star. A prophet, said Rolling Stone. A menace, said Bob Dole, and both were right. Studios dubbed him the next James Dean. Salons, the next Janet. Untamed, untamable. He embodied the black male myth, made art of it, was imprisoned by it. I'm going to say the young niggas, he said, and called himself a soldier. The name was apt because Tupac was born in the middle of a war. Its beginnings can be traced by a defining moment in U.S. race relations, the Bitter Ocean Hill, Browns Hill teacher strike in 1968. On one side were the local members of the United Federation of Teachers, overwhelmingly white and Jewish. On the other, thousands of parents, poor and black and Puerto Rican. At issue was power. Who had it? The teachers who had shut the schools in a dispute over community control, or the parents who had crossed picket lines to keep them open. Caught up in it was 21-year-old Alice Faye Williams, a North Carolina maid's daughter and high school dropout who had played at gang war and briefly loved a bodyguard of Malcolm X's. Now, as the aunt of one of the kids, she found herself serving as a makeshift teacher. By the time her lessons were over, several invictive field months later, the old civil rights coalition was in tattered and Alice Williams was a new person. Afeni Shakur, Black Panther, she took up with Lumumba, a Panther organizer, and adopted the party rhetoric about offing oppressor pigs. Speaking often as not within earshot of undercover cops, soon a shotgun-toting squad of them was pounding on her door. The charge against her and 20 comrades was conspiring to set off a race war with gunpowder. So Afeni's birth name was Alice Faye Williams. Out on bail, Afeni got pregnant, though not by Lumumba. Who the father was, she claimed she wasn't sure. Abortion was not an option she considered even when she was returned to jail after the flight of several co-defendants. This is my prince, he said, patting her swollen belly. He is going to save the black nation. It was Afeni, this little thing you could put in your pocket, says columnist Murray Kempton, who covered the trial. Who saved the Panthers, acting as her own lawyer. She shredded their accusers with innocent questions. Had they seen her carrying a gun? No. Making explosives? No. Working in the hospital? Yes. In the schools? Yes. In the streets? Yes. And had the efforts been for her people? Yes, they admitted, blinking at the unschooled girl whose power came out of her head. The jury took less than 20 minutes to vote, acquitted of all 156 counts. A month later, in June 1971, Divided Gemini by the star chart, Afeni gave birth to a son. She named him Tupac Amur Incan for a shining serpent. After an 18th century Peruvian revolutionary whom Spanish colonizers pulled apart with horses. In December 1996, a left-wing guerrilla group bearing the same name invaded the Japanese ambassador's residence in Lima, taking hostages. Afeni settled with her baby in the Bronx and pursued preying landlords, not as a panther but as a paralegal. Her son grew up bright and mannerly, something Afeni saw by rewarding mischief with a copy of the New York Times and orders to read it front to back. Whatever kids in the neighborhood did, Afeni says he made up the game. Pressure, though, were all around. They mounted when Afeni had another child, a daughter born 2 years after Tupac. Her father, Mutulu Shakur, also a Panther, was in no position to help the family. He was on a road that would lead to 60 years behind bars for a fatal armored car holdup. Tupac's godfather, Panther Geronimo Pratt, wasn't around either. He was doing a life sentence in California on dubious homicide charges. His attorney would later win nationwide recognition. His name was Johnny Cochran. The one male regularly on hand was Afeni's lover, Legs, a small-time associate of Harlem drug lord Nicky Barnes. To Tupac, however, Legs was all the daddy available. That, he said later, is where the thug in me came from. Mama taught me something else. What do you want to be when you grow up? A minister asked when Tupac was 10. The answer was instantaneous, a revolutionary. On Afeni's salary, even necessities were luxuries. Here, we was kicking all the ish about the revolution and we was starving, Tupac told writer Kevin Powell. There were riches, though, in the art prints Afeni brought from the library, particularly Van Gogh's Swirling the Star Night that held the boy's attention for hours. He found another refuge when Afeni enrolled him in a Harlem theater group. A natural by 13, he was playing Travis in A Raisin in the Sun at a Jesse Jackson fundraiser at the Hallowed Apollo Theater. I remember thinking, this is something none of them kids can do, he told Powell. I didn't like my life, but through acting, I could become somebody else. For Afeni, there were no escapes. Her job evaporated and Legs was jailed for credit card fraud. On and off welfare, she moved her family often, sometimes to homeless shelters. At every stop, Delicate featured Tupac was taunted for being pretty. Tube sock. The kids called him tuberculosis. Now that don't make no difference. Cruel. And the same things every day, holes in my jeans, the effed up sneakers, he recalled to writer William Shaw. You don't want to be Tupac. You want to be Jack. The indignities, though, were limited. My mother had a rep, said Tupac. Couldn't nobody touch us. Eventually, they landed in Baltimore, where a relative had promised Afeni help getting a job doing data processing. Upon arrival, Afeni phoned Legs in prison and was informed he died at age 41 of a crack-induced heart attack. I couldn't even cry, man, Tupac told Powell. I felt I needed a daddy to show me the ropes, and I didn't have one. What he did have after door knocking by Afeni was admission to the prestigious Baltimore School for the Arts. There he starred in several productions and began dabbling in rap. For Tupac, who'd already begun setting down what he saw around him in fragments of poetry, the music became the newspaper of his life's experience. That school, he said to Powell, was the freest I ever felt. The city streets, though held no starry nights, toward the end of Tupac's junior year, a neighborhood boy was killed in a gang shooting. Worried for her kids, Afeni sent them to spend the summer with a friend in suburban Marion County across the Golden State from San Francisco. They hadn't been there long when their hostess called. She said she was going into alcohol rehab the next day. Afeni better get on a plane. The place Tupac's mother thought would be Green Lawn safe turned out to be a mean little ghetto called Marion City, which was overlooked by hills and condominiums where rich people lived. Square mile Marion City had one main street, one general store for liquor, one school, one sprawling public housing project, and among the cops, one named the Jungle. Before long, Afeni was snored up in it, a crack addict. She hid the habit from her 17-year-old son, but she could no longer summon the questions to quell the doubts that held her captive. After a series of arguments, Tupac moved out, joining a group of boys in an abandoned apartment. He went to school over the hill at an affluent Mount Tamalpais high, where he gained a reputation as an actor of almost spooky intensity. Few knew he was on his own, and fewer still that he was eking a living by, among other things, working in a pizza parlor. Tupac, however, now had no one to camouflage reality. It'd be the shitty, dumb niggas who let women rise houses, he told Paul. And I ain't had ish. They used to diss me because I was at the bottom. So he started hustling crack, hung around with the thugs. He recorded later, and even though they sold drugs, they showed a young brother love. That ended after friends reported aghast Afeni buying drugs. I started blocking her out of my mind, he recalled. He scrimped by with odd jobs, chased girls, wrote poetry, and suggested that his friends get high smoking his ashes after he died. But rap was the real turn on. You'd go with him to have a hamburger and a Coke, and he started writing songs on a napkin, says Molly Munjuis. Usually rapping with his roommates, the One Nation MC, they called themselves. He attended class sporadically and just shy of graduation, stopped going altogether. Thinking a change of scene would do Tupac good, Watani Tekyimba, a politically active friend of Afeni's, invited him to LA, where he was organizing youth programs in the sprawling South Central ghetto. Tupac joined in for several months, but the political cast of the work, so much like Afeni's, put him off. He loved her, Watani says, but he wanted to carve out an identity of his own. That meant going back to rap and Marion, where he met a young white woman, Layla Steinberg. They happened on each other in a park one afternoon, not far from where Layla, an accomplished singer and dancer, was giving workshops on using music to build self-esteem. I was reading Winnie Mandela's A Part of My Soul with him, she remembers, when I hear a voice behind me say, "That's a good one. It really moves well." I turn around and see this stunning young man. "You really read it?" I asked. Tupac begins reciting quotations from memory. By the time they finished talking, Layla, a single mother of 3 little girls, had offered him a room in her Sonoma County house, and Tupac had appointed her as his manager. "So my business is going to be handling you," laughed Layla. "What's yours?" "Mine," said Tupac, deadly serious, "is young black males." They toured inner city schools, Layla giving talks, Tupac rapping. 8 months slipped by, however, with no gigs. "It's easy," Pac said one evening as they dined on his specialty, potato tacos. "Just tell people what I always tell you, that I'm going to sell more records than any rapper ever." The next day, Layla phoned Atron Gregory, manager of Digital Underground, an Oakland-based dance party group. "The most ever, huh?" asked Atron, amused by Tupac's pretensions. "Okay, I'll give him a chance." Tupac started as a roadie carrying bags. Soon he was dancing, then commanding the mic. He demanded attention, says DU rapper Money B. You could depend on that. The only way you couldn't depend on Pac was to keep his cool. He lost it his very first time performing. Something went wrong with the sound system, and Atron had to restrain him from slugging one of the equipment men. We said, okay, we can use you, recalls Shock G, Tupac's closest friend in the group. 2 hours later, Tupac's back like nothing happened. It was like that all the time. He flip on you, then the incident didn't exist. He had quieter times, such as the night on the road he sneak off with Shock and a couple of girls to the dark of the tour bus. As Shock snuggled with his date, he heard Tupac whispering a few rows up. I'm thinking he's getting it on with this young lady, says Shock. But then I listen, he's explaining terms of endearment to her real low, so like I won't hear. I almost laughed. What does Pac know about terms of endearment? He knew a lot, as well as a lot about Mozart, Shakespeare's. Look how he busted up with Macbeth. Tupac told a Los Angeles Times reporter years later, congratulating the bard for some serious ghetto-ish. Among rappers, though, there were no points for that knowledge. Points came from Plan, the hard guy who talked trash to state troopers. There was a price to be paid for this swaggering. Tupac's hair was falling out in clumps from the stress, but he didn't mind. He found an identity. He was standing out. That was my number one thing, he said. Everybody's gonna know me. Soon he had recorded more than enough songs for a solo album. The trick was getting it released. He was funny, adorable, a real flirt, says Tommy Boy Records president Monica Lynch, who didn't sign Tupac, but as an artist, he wasn't there yet. There was no convincing Tupac that. The problem, as he saw it, was DU's happy rap style. Gangsters was the fashion now, and LA was its paradise. By 1990, everyone was there. Dr. Dre, Snoop Doggy Dogg, Eazy-E, the Ice Cube and T. Be Real Niggas called the Voices was the ominously slow, deep beat boom from cruising car streets. F the police, no matter that, many of the music makers were well-educated products of good two-parent homes. But I tell you, okay. Gangsta sold to the pinkest of Caucasians as well as blacks. You know what I don't understand? Why so many people called white listen to gangsta rap, and then some of them are still racist? Or is that like envy, pretending to be racist? Whatever it is. Okay. Layla wanted no part of it, and cautioning Pac to watch his back, turned over his management to Atron. They were still scourging for a record deal when Money B came to town to audition for the lead in a movie called Juice. Tupac tagged along. The part Money tested for was Bishop, an icy-souled punk who kills his best friend to cover up his crimes. Money couldn't summon the chill. I can do this, ish, said Tupac, grabbing the script. All right, said producer Neil Mortz, do it. Neil Mortiz, do it. What followed was a shot, dynamic, bold, powerful, magnet. Any word you want to use, says Mortiz. Tupac was it. We cast him right on the spot. They shot in Harlem with Spike Lee's cinematographer Ernest Dickerson directing.
The best thing for you to do right now is to leave me alone, okay? So back off, okay, fatty? This clown coming in here with spiked orange juice. Yeah. To everybody on the set, can I get your attention, please? Everybody on the set, this is straight orange juice.
Tupac, what's going on right now? What is going on? I'm
You don't know. He's fucking... I've already committed a murder already. I'm about to commit a double murder.
be right. Seriously, I need him. Come on, man. Fuck y'all, man. I'm trying to do my... He's one of our star players here.
He's one of the star makers. Star maker. I'm Tupac Shakur.
Thank you.
On Rap Day, Martise took Tupac aside to congratulate him for his performance and tease him about spending so much of his scale wages on old jewelry. Tupac later rationalized by quoting a Robert Frost poem likening gold to innocence. So done goes by the day, nothing gold can stay. 10 years from now, said Martise, you're going to be a big star. 10 years from now, Tupac replied, I'm going to be alive. Back in LA, Tron was on the verge of closing a deal with Xscape Records, an upstart independent label then owned by department store heir Ted Field and former John Lennon producer Jimmy Iovine, who at the time were in partnership with Time Warner. The tape that sealed it included one song about looking for a father's love and another about pleasure of shooting and out with cops. Right away, you could tell that this guy was different from the rest of the world, says Interscope president Tom Whaley. I couldn't slow him down. I never worked with anyone who could write so many great songs so quickly. The album that resulted, Tupacalypse Now, sold 500,000 units and helped persuade Time Warner to increase its Interscope stake. Tupacalypse Now was still selling when Juice bowed, and fueled by raves for Tupac became very profitable. Suddenly, says Whaley, Tupac was larger than life. One who noticed was Marion Suge Knight, a 6'3", 335-pound figure of multiple incarnations, gang hanger on reserve lineman for the Los Angeles Rams, and his most recent courtesy of $10 million in financing from Interscope, Time Warner, proprietor of ultra-hot Death Row Records. Suge, sweet as sugar, he'd been called as a child, had an eye for talent, and was blunt going after it. According to one suit filed by Eazy-E on Ruthless Records, he picked up the release of Dr. Dre's contract by sending some boys round to see Eazy. They didn't waste time haggling, just handed over a pen, held iron pipes to his head till he signed. Knight denies the charges. The suit was eventually thrown out. But that was Suge's reputation. Direct, 6 arrests worth of candor, but the count of the LAPD, and there were a lot of stories the cops hadn't heard. The time Suge allegedly tried to force an opponent to drink a jar of his own, presumably sweet as sugar urine, or the night he reportedly threatened to throw Vanilla Ice off a 15th-floor hotel balcony, or the day Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson visited his office and found an assistant mopping up a pool of blood. Business dispute was Suge's explanation. Never heard of that, says Knight's lawyer. I never heard that Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton came to visit Suge. Interscope executives knew all the stories. They reportedly seen Suge's methods firsthand. At their first meeting, Suge, who arrived with a trio of bodyguards, tore into the only black executive present, rap promotion head Fabian DuVernay. You my hoe. An eyewitness says Suge shouted, yanking DuVernay out of his seat and into an adjacent office. When the door opened again, says the eyewitness, there was DuVernay suspended in midair, Suge's hand around his throat, the bodyguards kicking him. Both DuVernay and Suge Knight's lawyers say the incident never happened. Since then, Suge had brought Interscope millions. His gang pals, the Bloods, were making sure of that, dropping by mom and pop stores and South Central dances with Death Row releases and little hints. You're playing this, they say, stroking the bulge beneath their Timberland, and wonders the records would spin. Suge's lawyer never heard such a thing. With a Quincy Shakur progeny, however, more respectful measures were called for Suge, who ran into Tupac at a recording studio, tried him first, offering $200,000 for a single song. Pac took the cash, but loyal to Tron and Whaley, declined the Death Row invite. A seed, however, was planted. The money in any case soon vanished. Some went for a Mercedes 300, Tupac's dream car, which lasted less than 24 hours before he totaled it. What the? The next day, he bought another, and when a friend admired it, Tupac gave it to him. He did hold on to an Oakland apartment, only Tupac kept forgetting his keys. He handled that by punching in windows so many that after a couple of weeks, his pad had the tightness of a colander. Aren't you worried about security? Shock asked during a visit, gazing at the gold jewelry lying around. Nah, said Pac, hefting an automatic weapon. I got this. The words were just out when the gun ventilated the floorboards. Like rapping, Pac offered. You gotta practice. Friends had told Afeni of Tupac's success. The news, though, was always filtered through a drug haze. I was holding on to that ish like it was life, says Afeni. I didn't think there was no hope for me. The climb out began during the 20th anniversary acquittal reunion of the Panther 21 when a friend invited her on a drive to suburban Connecticut. Their destination, it turned out, was a rehab clinic. I was kicking and screaming, Finney said. But this woman there, you gotta know, she was white. She wouldn't let me go. Saved my life. Tupac wasn't ready to forgive. Growing up, he told her she lied to him about drugs, hadn't been real, about the hold they had on her. That's what counted most with him, Pac said, being real. His fans thought he was real, believed he truly was the bishop who had so chillingly said on the screen, I am crazy, but I don't give a F. Tupac didn't disappoint. The first incident occurred in Oakland shortly after the release of Tupaculous. Ticket for jaywalking. Tupac mouthed off and wound up bloody in a jail cell. 3 months later, he was making news again, this time for his lyrics being the alleged cause of the death of a Texas state trooper who had been shot pulling over a black 19-year-old car thief named Ronald Ray Howard. The jury sentenced Howard to death, and the trooper's widow slapped Tupac with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit before it was thrown out. No less than Vice President Dan Quayle was saying, Tupac's music has no place in our society. Tupac appeared too busy to notice. Besides laying plans for a second album and another movie, John Singleton's Poetic Justice, co-starring Janet Jackson, was preparing a benefit concert for Marion City's 50th anniversary festival scheduled for late August 1992. Layla, who heard rumblings of showing the uppity niggas, warned him not to go. Of course, my homies want to see me, Tupac said. When Tupac arrived at the wheel of a new Jeep, children squealed for autographs. But then the growling older boys came up. Get out of here, nigga. You don't belong no more. Rocks began flying and the back crashed into the windshield as fists tore at Tupac. A pistol in his belt clattered onto the road. Someone picked it up and a shot rang out. Quade Walker Teal in the head and he fell dead over his new bicycle. Tupac cried and cried when he called to tell about that little boy, says, well, Tony, you couldn't console him. He memorialized quiet in a song, Something to Die For, and more considered his own death grisly in music like If I Die Tonight, and reflectively in a poem called In the Event of My Demise. His tattoos seemed to invite violence. One showed a panther about to strike, another an AK-47, but it was the 3-inch letters he had cut across his stomach that said it all. Thug life, they spelled. The I formed by a bullet. He explained that thug meant those who didn't have anything and that the letters were an acronym for the hate you gave little infants, F everybody. Friends such as Layla got the message. The public saw only his press clips. He got another 7 months following the Marion shooting when cops found marijuana and a gun on him in the aftermath of a brawl with a Hollywood limo driver. 3 weeks later, he was in the headlines again for taking a swing at a rapper with a baseball bat during a concert in Lansing, Michigan. He was still appealing a 10-day sentence on that charge when in October 93 there was more trouble. Pulling into his Atlanta hotel after a show, Tupac spotted Two whites harassing a black man. As he started to intervene, one of the whites' brothers, who were also off-duty police officers, threw a pistol. Tupac whipped out his own gun and got off 3 quick shots, wounding both men. When police came to arrest him, he was in his room listening to lines from Dear Mama. It was hell hugging on my mama from a jail cell. And who thinking elementary, hey, I see penitentiary, the Atlanta charges would be dismissed. But there was one case Tupac wouldn't beat. In New York, for some club dates, 2 weeks after Atlanta's shooting, Tupac accepted an invitation to Neil's, an upscale dance Imperium. His movie was out and it was doing fine at the box office. His second album, Strictly for My Niggas, had debuted at #1. Running lot of the New York Jets, Derek Coleman of the New Jersey Nets, gave him brother grips of congratulation. I felt so tall that night, Tupac said, like I was glowing. Someone introduced him to a girl, a big-chested 19-year-old. They slid into the dance floor. Sensuously, she swayed him to a dark corner. Tupac felt her hands go inside his shirt, then unzip his fly. In a moment, she was sucking him. They went to Tupac's suite and had sex. The next day, the young woman left a message complimenting Tupac on his prowess. Pac's road manager made arrangements for her to return in a few days when Tupac finished a show in New Jersey. Tupac was exhausted when she turned up. She began rubbing his chest and 3 of Pac's roadies walked in. Ooh, she's got a nice ass, one of them said. Put her panties down, said another. There were 2 versions of what happened next, according to Tupac. He knew where things were going, but uninterested in participating, got up and went into another suite to talk to his publicist. He fell asleep on the couch. According to the young woman, she was repeatedly and sodomized by Tupac and his crew. Okay, we all know what happened. He was accused and then he went to jail. Whatever occurred, the episode ended with Tupac in handcuffs. I'm young, black, at 22. I'm making money, he told reporters. They can't find a way to make me dirty. It would be a year before the case went to trial. In the interval, Tupac's notoriety clawed at him. John Singleton was forced to drop him from Higher Learning after getting a veto from Columbia. The directing Hughes brothers, Albert and Alan, jettisoned him too, following disputes during pre-production of Menace to Society. Tupac confronted the twins at a video shoot. The 2 niggas against me, he said. That's a fair fight. And with that, started swinging. Allen was bloodied and Tupac got 15 days in jail. Not long afterward, Vibe put him on the cover in a straitjacket. Where do I go to stay out of trouble? Tupac asked concerned friends. There's not a place called Careful. His career wouldn't have allowed a visit in any event. It wasn't his musicianship that was making him, he admitted. His only uniqueness was a compulsion to test the limits. Being crazy, as he put it, is what rescued him from a life of nothing. The incidents, though, were pulling up and rumors were circulating of contracts on his life. Shock took them seriously enough to fly to Los Angeles, where Tupac was working on a video. During a break in the filming, Shock handed him a key. This is for my condo. If you ever want to be where nobody knows where you're at, go. You got a place. There are threats out there. Tupac's old friend warned. All I ever wanted to do, Tupac replied, was have my voice on a record and be in a movie. And I've done that. All the rest of this shit, I don't give a F. So don't you worry about me. Then he handed back the key. The months passed. Tupac made another movie, Bullet, co-starring Mickey Rourke, and readied another record. Bit by bit, he also reconstructed his relationship with Afeni, who moved to a suburb in Atlanta. Tupac took a house nearby and they visited often. We come out of a tunnel, Afeni says. We were back at what it was like when he was a kid, all sunshine. Others saw the beginnings of a change as well. One sign was the resumption of his school visit with Layla. Why be a thug? A teacher asked him in Los Angeles. Tupac answered, "Who else is going to love me?" At another stop where grade school children read their lessons for him, an aide was startled to see tears roll down his cheeks. When a few days later, the parents of a dying Maryland boy wrote saying their son's last wish was to meet him, Tupac flew to his bedside. "No press," he ordered. There was none, nor any the day the little boy was buried, and Tupac renamed his music publishing company Joshua's Dream. Then in November '94 came the R trial. Afeni hired a movement lawyer who defended Tupac movement style in your face with the judge. On the night the jury went out, Tupac met up with a few friends on a cash hunt. He was low. Most of his money was supporting an ever-enlarging circle of relatives, nearly 40 of them now. When his pager reported an offer of $7 grand for recording a rap, he headed to a studio off Times Square. The door buzzed open and a voice called out from the second floor landing. Tupac recognized it as that of a sideman for the East Coast rapper, the Notorious B.I.G. Tupac's relaxed. He knew Biggie and his label owner, Sean Puffy Combs. He pushed the elevator button. All at once, two black men appeared, automatic pistols drawn. "Don't nobody move," one of them said. Everybody on the floor. Tupac's companions, including his best friend Randy Stretch Walker, hit the deck.
Legendary rapper Tupac Shakur would have turned 52 years old today. His unsolved murder and bitter rivalry with the Notorious B.I.G. came to define an era of hip-hop. That beef started after a shooting right here in New York City. I've uncovered footage from that time many people haven't seen in decades. It's December 1st, 1994. The rare, raw footage of Tupac Shakur in a wheelchair the morning after he was shot in Manhattan. Despite 5 bullet wounds, the iconic rapper is on his way to court to hear the verdict in his sexual assault case. A series of events that would change his life and, in turn, rap history forever. I wanted to know more, so I searched deep into the Fox 5 archives from our reporting at the time.
They'll have no fury like a little bit sport.
We found this impromptu press conference.
Why am I the only one in court right now? Why is the cameras all on me?
Not long after his arrest on the charges.
I guess I am going to say that I'm a thug. That's because I came from the gutter and I'm still here. I'm not saying I'm a thug because I want to rob you and rape people with them. I'm a businessman.
And outside the court as the trial was underway.
I want straight up not guilty.
And finally, the night he was shot in the lobby of Quad Studios on November 30th, 1994, a hotspot for rap artists at the time. That's Sean Diddy Combs outside as police arrived on scene that night.
So he's basically in New York while he's on trial, doing mixtapes, doing guest appearances on other artists' songs because he needed that money to pay his legal bills to get through that trial.
We were granted exclusive access inside Quad Studios located on 7th Avenue in Times Square 29 years after the shooting. And on that night, Tupac was coming to this very space where we are right now. He was going to be a guest on a new track. But that's when it all happened down in the lobby of this building.
He's walking around the corner, and he hears some familiar voices from several stories above, and the people yelling at him were Lil C's and Chico Del Vec, both members of Biggie's affiliate rap group, Junior Mafia. And so they're all excited to see each other, and Lil C's runs down to the lobby to meet Tupac.
Tupac was in the lobby of the building. He was waiting to go upstairs when those 3 gunmen entered. They demanded jewelry and cash. Tupac initially resisted. Then he was shot 5 times, and those gunmen made off with about $40,000 worth of jewelry. Eventually, Tupac was dragged into the elevator. What happened next would change the course of rap history forever.
He said he grabbed the guy's gun and they were struggling back and forth.
Legendary rapper Spice One was Tupac's friend. Together, they recorded classic hits like Jealous Got Me Strapped. He says Shakur told him the story of exactly how it happened.
He said they both paused when the dude shot, and then he started pulling, he looked at him in the face, and then he started struggling again. He said the dude shot again, and then he shot one more time. He said that's when he shot him in the groin area. And then he said, that's when I fell to the ground.
Was it an inside job? Was it somebody that they were timing it out?
Video Music Box DJ and rap historian Ralph McDaniel says the feud that followed, pitting East and West Coast against each other, culminating in Tupac and Biggie's still unsolved murders, would come to define a generation in hip-hop, which still has consequences to this day.
It'll never go away. And people just want to find out how did this happen. But I know one thing for sure is that they were best of friends. And they were.
But Tupac froze. "Shoot that MFer," one gunman shouted, grappling for Tupac's diamond ring and gold chains. There was a booming flash, then 4 more bullets hitting Tupac in the head, hand, and testicle. "I couldn't hear nothing," he said later. "I couldn't see nothing. It was all just white." Afeni checked him out of Bellevue the next day. He had been lucky none of the slugs had done serious damage. He had also had an unexpected visitor, a former Panther. Billy found his father. Right then, he said, "I thought I had died and gone to heaven." The jury's verdict kept their reunion short. It was just then acquittal on the serious counts of sodomy, and weapons possession, conviction of 3 lesser charges of sexual touching without consent. "Thug life to me is dead," a chastened Tupac told Kevin Powell while awaiting sentence. He been frightened by the responsibilities he had been born to, hidden from them by smoking too much, drinking, going to clubs, just being numb. He hadn't R the young woman, he said, but he hadn't stopped her from being R either. "I had a job," as he put it, "and I never showed up. All that, however, was over. I'm going to show people my true heart," Tupac Shakur said. "I'm going to show them the man that my mother raised." The judge had other ideas, condemning Tupac's arrogance. He sentenced him to a term of up to 4.5 years in maximum security facility at Dannemora, New York. His lawyers filed an appeal and tried to raise his $1.3 million bail. The weeks went by with no action. His new album, Me Against the World, was out and immediately hit #1. Royalties, however, were slow in coming. There were recording expenses and legal costs to be paid first, so Tupac would have to sit tight. Afeni and friends visited, and a college student he married as a jailhouse convenience checked in regularly. The guards hassled him, but the inmates were okay. After word spread about his lineage, safe from being shivved, he filled the days writing poetry, studying a Renaissance Italian who well knew the power of Princess Machiavelli. Tupac, enthused to writer Sean, said, "If you live your life like how you should live your life, instead of excelling, then you're not living your life at all. You're a fool." Nights, though, were a problem. He'd wake up sweating and screaming. The cops claim he had been attacked in a simple robbery, but Biggie, Tupac believed, had set him up. Puffy, too, maybe even his man Stretch, who potato sacked into the floor without protecting him. That was what was gnawing at him, Tupac said, as the 11th month of the imprisonment neared. No one was protecting him. They just talk about Suge Knight and his annual revenues and Death Row Records and how he came up to Tupac, got him out of prison, wrote a contract on a piece of paper by hand. David Kenner. I did a video about Tupac. It's called I think how they took Tupac down. So a lot of this is in. Some of this is not in there. I haven't heard before, and some of it is. His fears didn't stop the scripts from coming in, so many that Tupac set up a company, Euthanasia, and hired his old friend Molly to run it. She was also handling his community chores, the financing of an at-risk youth center, the bankrolling of a year-round South Central sports team, the setting up of an 800 number that would allow kids to call him whenever they had a problem. He had another company 24/7 after his work pace all day, every day for his music and video work. The scripts he was writing, the books he would begin as soon as he finished the plans he was drawing up with Layla to reform the education system. There were other projects equally urgent. tutoring for the crew he called the Outlaws Immortals, looking after 2 children who had been orphaned in a drug killing, taking the stepdaughter of a murdered friend to her high school prom. He did them all with time enough left over to spend 4 hours at the House of Blues one night dancing with a woman in a wheelchair. He was freer, looser, and some said it was the doing of Kidada Jones, the woman who was wearing his ring. It had not been an easy courtship. At their first meeting in a club shortly before Tupac's trial, the creamy-faced model wouldn't speak to him. She had rapper boyfriends before. There was also the matter of her father. In an interview, Tupac had dissed him for marrying her white mother, former Mod Squad star Peggy Limpton. Kidada hadn't gotten over it, neither had her dad, Quincy Jones. At their second meeting, Tupac apologized. She gave him her phone number then. At their third, he introduced her to Afeni. "I love her," Tupac announced. "She's going to be my wife, and she's having my children." Slowly, Tupac reeled her in. The first tug of the line was when they were having coffee one post-midnight at an LA deli. A black man came up behind their booth and put his hands hard on Tupac's shoulder. "Young man," he growled, "I need to have a few words with you." "Mr. Jones," Tupac gulped, "I need to have a few words with you too, sir." They went to another table to talk. When Kidada looked up, they were hugging. After Tupac's jail term, his marriage of convenience was annulled. Then the poems began arriving at Kidada's house, one every day, always accompanied by a rose. Soon, Tupac and Kidada were living together. Their house, a Death Row leased estate in suburban Calabasas, was always crowded. Afeni and Shakiwa visited for long stretches, bringing Shakiwa's little girls with them, the Outlaws. Tupac's teenage cousins were also in the residence, along with any friend who needed a bed. Tupac completed the dorm atmosphere by installing banks of video games and slot machines. The boys were free to use them as long as they turned up for Tupac's fatherly talks delivered beneath the most prized possession, a print his mother gave him, The Starry Night. In truth, he didn't own much else. Though Tupac has sold more than 60 million in records since his release, by the label's reckoning, he owed Death Row 4.9 million. All those services Suge had been providing, including the bail money, had been charged to Tupac's account. Word on the street was that millions more had gone to the mob, not the MOB, members of Blood, on Suge's diamond ring. But the New York family that went by the name Genovese, Knight's lawyer responds, Suge wouldn't know a member of Genovese crime gang if he tripped over them. All Pac knew was that he wanted out. He was sick of the game, says one of the inmates he confided in. He was exhausted playing the gangster role. I'm sure he was. Publicly, though, Tupac still acted the loyalist. "I'm a soldier," he proclaimed in a late August interview with Vibe, calling himself Capo to Don Suge. "Me and Suge will always do business together forever." 3 days later, after finishing the album that would close out his Death Row contract, Tupac put out feelers about moving to Warner's. The soldier had begun shedding his uniform. Afeni returned to Atlanta the morning of August the 31st. On her way to the airport, she stopped at the Wilshire Boulevard apartment Tupac used when he worked late. He seemed fresh, though, when Afeni buzzed him down to the lobby. "Why didn't you just come up?" he asked. "Wanted to give you your space," she said. "Got a whole lot of space," Tupac said, gathering her in a hug. "How many mothers do I have?" He went out to the car to say hello to his sister, who had recently enrolled in cosmetology classes, Afeni recalls. He stood outside the car and said, "I'm very proud of you," to her. They were always trying to make each other proud. She had gone back to school to help open a line of cosmetics with Kidada. She had been in school for months. That was the first time he acknowledged it, saying he was so proud. It was a nice, warm feeling for a parent. A few days later, Tupac was traveling to New York to attend the MTV Music Awards with Suge. Kidada assumed he had been bedding a woman or two as well. Tupac, though, surprised her. "I can't do that anymore," he said in his first call home. "I'm all yours." They laughed and began making plans. When he got back, Tupac said they chilled a couple of weeks in Hawaii. Then they moved out of the Death Row house and into a new apartment he found for them on the edge of Beverly Hills. Then Pac said maybe they get serious about having the baby they've been talking about the last few months. Previously, he had said he didn't want to bring a child into such a corrupt world. Now, though, he was different. As they signed off, he whispered what he did every night: "I'd take a bullet for you." He returned to Los Angeles the morning of September the 7th. Kidada sensed immediately that he was on the edge. She guessed it was a scrape he had been involved in following the MTV Awards. "No," Pac told her, "there was a heavyweight bout that night at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon. And weeks before, he promised Suge he'd go to it with him. He didn't want to," Tupac said, "but he given Suge his word. Anyway, she could come along, not to the fight. He didn't want her with that rowdy bunch, but to the party Suge was having afterward, a club he owned downtown. If she were beside him, maybe it would be okay." As the day went along, his mood worsened. By the time they got back to Calabasas, he was barely speaking. "What do you want me to pack?" Kidada asked, knowing his fussiness about clothes. Pac only shrugged. She reached for the bulletproof vest he'd taken to wearing. "No," he said, "it'll be too hot." They drove to the desert in silence. At their one stop, a gas station convenience store, Pac brought 5 magazines. All were about guns. He studied them intently until they reached their hotel, the Luxor on the Strip. The sight of the enormous black pyramid sent a chill through Kidada. "Gosh," she said, "it's so evil." Pledging he'd be back right after the fight, Tupac headed into a joint-up with Suge, who maintained a gaudy mansion up the street from Tyson's. They partied a while, then a beefy entourage in tow drove to the MGM Grand. Tupac was wild. Okay, and then it just talks about him getting into a fight. Tupac was wild-eyed when he got back to the Luxor. "Some niggas started a fight with me for nothing," he told Kidada. "Something's up. You stay here." After a fast change into a baseball jersey and some baggy jeans, he was gone. See, he must have knew something was going on. That's why he was tense that day. They just talking about when they went off. He was driving with Suge. A photographer took the picture of Tupac in the car with Suge. The Tupac, that infamous picture of Tupac looking at the camera as Suge was driving. Didn't that look like he knew something was about to go down? Tupac's long lashed eyes seemed lifeless. A still photographer took their picture at a light on the Strip. Tupac's long lashed eyes seemed lifeless. They halted at another light seconds later at the edge of a dark, undeveloped area between the Strip and downtown. A white Cadillac bearing California plates eased up on the passenger side. As a pistol barrel eased from a window, a black man got out, gun drawn. Tupac snapped alert, and frantically he started climbing into the back seat. There was a fusillade of 13 shots. One hit Tupac in the hand, and then they just talking about that. When he was going into the emergency room, Tupac said he was dying. He regained consciousness once when Kidada was putting Don McLean's Vincent into the CD player next to his bed. She heard a moan and his eyes fluttered open. They were filled with mucus and swollen. Wow. "Tupac," Kidada said, "coming close. Do you hear me?" He seemed to nod. "If you hear me," she said, "move your feet." The sheets rustled at the end of the bed. "Do you know I love you?" she said. "Do you know we all love you?" This time the nod was distinct. As Kidada turned to the door, Tupac shook in convulsions. Then he slipped into a coma. Then it said he was cremated He was cremated, and Finney spread his ashes on a green hill in a part of Los Angeles where it's very peaceful. Yeah, okay, it was almost over. And then it was asking who killed him and things of that nature. Well, all right, folks, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm also working on something, and when I'm done, I will publish it. So those who have not subscribed, subscribe and hit the notification bells or bell to let you know when I drop a video. Other than that, I'm out. I will see you guys in the next video. 10-4 over and out.